pleasure to be here in Hacker Valley, and my name is Kathy Bauer, and I'm from Tennessee. My husband and I are directors of White Creek Wellness Center, and this is a place where you can go to learn about a healthy lifestyle. It's a nonprofit organization, so it's very affordable, and it's been a blessing to many people to overcome heart disease, which is our topic tonight, diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, and cancer, and of course all the other diseases that are from the American diet that we have these days. But it is a wake-up call. The condition that we are in is very serious. Many people are having heart attacks. So what do we want? We want greater health and happiness. We want strength to endure stress. We want energy for the day. And we want tranquility of life and joy. So we need a new start. And basically this is what we're going to be talking about during these health series that we're having here, is how to gain that new start. And of course there's 7 different laws of health, and we call them our 7 doctors, that we can go to help us with our health. It's nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trust in divine power. Now, my husband found this Newsweek article, and it was in the airport, and it stopped him in his tracks. It says, "What one word will save your life?" And as he looked at it, he was very interested. It said, and in the article, it says the word is no. That one word that can save your life. And no to what we have available for our healing now, which is surgery or drugs. And we have an opportunity during this revival that we're having here to learn some very important aspects of healing, natural, that are not going to harm our bodies. So what is disease? Why do we get sick? And this is from a book called How to Live. It says, disease is a process of purification and reparation. It is not an enemy of the vital powers, but a struggle of the vital powers themselves in defense. Disease is not the thing to be removed, expelled, and destroyed or killed. It is not a thing, but an action. Not an enemy, but a process. Not an enemy at war with the living organism, but a remedial effort and action to be cooperated with. So, as we see, disease is a reaction of our bodies in trying to heal themselves. And we can cooperate with that, or we can take a drug to stop that, or we can cut that organ out that is being affected by it, or we can work with it and use natural remedies and diet and all the other laws that we mentioned here at the beginning. So science has believed that the cell is controlled from the outside. Louis Pasteur said on his deathbed that he was wrong. It's not the germ, it's the landscape. So it's what the germ has for it to feed upon that's going to cause the cell to be healthy or to be weak. And so Dr. Lipton has proven the cell is controlled from the outside, which is enucleating, which is when the environment of the cell is clean, then the cell can bring in things and it can expel things. So we put the cells in clean environment and we will have renewed cells. So this is going to be our continued study throughout the health classes, how to obtain oxygenated blood and clean, free-flowing lymphatic system, because it's our lymphatic system that surrounds every cell of the body. And if we can get our lymphatic system clean, then the cells can expel their toxins and take in nutrients. So what are some of the diseases resulting from our systems being clogged up? And we have heart and blood vessel disease, which is the number one killer. And cancer is next. Chronic lung disease, accidents, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, pneumonia, kidney failure, septicemia, and suicide. And as we look at how these things are affecting us, if we understood that there are 2,600 deaths in a day, that's equal to 10 airplanes crashing in one day. Now, if that happened today, we certainly would have heard about it on the news. And we would do something about it. But why are we not recognizing that we need to do something about this heart attacks? So, it's the biggest killer in the entire world, not just the United States. In developed nations, the proportion of total deaths rises more than 50%. That's a lot. If we're going to die, half of us are going to die from a heart attack. Worldwide, heart attacks and strokes account for 25% of deaths.
Americans each ate about 120 pounds of meat annually. By 2007, that figure had exploded to no less than 222 pounds. In 1913, we ate about 40 pounds of processed sugar each per year. However, by 1999, our consumption of all refined sweeteners had risen to over 147 pounds. In 1909, Americans consumed around 294 pounds of dairy products apiece. But by 2006, our yearly intake of dairy had more than doubled to 605 pounds.
Okay, so this correlates right along with where we are going with our health. So the longer we've been here in the past 100 years, the more heart attacks and strokes that we're having. Okay, so conquering the number one killer. So statistics for the U.S. is heart disease, number one. Happens every 25 seconds. Every 45 seconds, 2,800 deaths a day. Risk from heart attack average is 50%. Risk from death of heart attack for this is for an average meat-eating man, is 50%. Risk of death from an attack from a vegetarian is 15%. Risk of death from a heart attack from a vegan, which is a total vegetarian, that means they don't consume any dairy or eggs or milk, cheese, those kind of things, is 15%. And, I'm sorry, 4%. The vegetarian is 15%. Rise in blood cholesterol from eating one egg a day is 12 points. Chance of dying from a heart attack when cholesterol is 210 is greater than 50%. The amount of cholesterol in all grains, nuts, beans, fruits, and vegetables is none. So we're going to try to understand this, is where this is coming from. This is taken from the Journal of American Medical Association.
Dr. Esselstyn also discovered that in the early 1970s, the risk for heart disease in rural China was 12 times lower than it was in the U.S. And in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, heart disease was rarely encountered. The link he noted between all the areas he studied was simple.
Virtually, the Western diet was non-existent. They had no animal products. They had no dairy, no meat.
Even more compelling to Esselstyn was some historical data that had long been overlooked. In World War II, the Germans occupied Norway. Among the first things they did was confiscate all the livestock and farm animals to provide supplies for their own troops. So the Norwegians were forced to eat mainly plant-based foods.
Now we look at the deaths in Norway, just antecedent to this period, from heart attack and stroke. 1927, 1930, 35, Look at right up here, right at the very top, 1939. Bingo! In come the Germans. Immediately, 1940, wow, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. Have we ever seen a population have their cardiovascular disease plummet like this from statins, from bypass surgery, or from stents? No. But look what immediately happened. With the cessation of hostilities in 1945, back comes the meat, back comes the dairy, back comes the strokes and heart attacks. I mean, it's such an absolute powerful lesson. But we didn't get it.
Mm-hmm. So that was very interesting. Now this is the 4 apocalyptic horsemen of heart disease. And if we have high cholesterol, if we have high blood pressure, if we are a smoker, and if we have diabetes, if you have all 4 of those, it's like you're waiting to have a heart attack. Okay, so lifestyle changes reduced heart disease death. In Finland, 14,257 men and 14,786 women lowered their cholesterol intake, lowered their blood pressure, and stopped smoking. Now, how they lowered their cholesterol was they just ceased eating the animal products because there's none in vegetable. They lowered their blood pressure, probably exercising more, drinking more water, but we'll be going into that more in our classes. And then those that were smoking stopped smoking, and the result was 55% decreased death rate in men and 68% decreased death rate in women. This is deaths from coronary heart disease. So the higher the cholesterol, the higher the deaths per 100,000. And as you can see, it gives the countries that have higher and higher and higher cholesterol all the way to Finland. And so these are the cities, the countries that consume more animal products. Correlates right along with that. And this is also mortality risk with higher cholesterol. Those that are around 200, and then 200 to 219, on up to 260. As you can see, the higher the cholesterol, the higher the mortality risk. So let's take a look at some of the foods that have high cholesterol. As you can see, fruits, grains, nuts, and vegetables contain 0 cholesterol. There just is not any. Now, some of the, if we get into rich nuts and oils and things like that, we can compound some problems with triglycerides and things, but as far as containing cholesterol, there is none. And when we take those that are on cholesterol medication, what that medication does is it stops the liver from producing cholesterol so that you can eat cholesterol. And so it's really better for us to have our own cholesterol than the cholesterol from animals. It's the way God intended. And let's see, as you can see, 1 large egg alone contains 213 milligrams of cholesterol, and beef brains being the highest. So cholesterol is an important physiologic steroid classified as a lipid or a fat. The name is derived from 2 Greek words which mean solid bile. Since bile occurs only in animal secretions, cholesterol will be found only in animal products. Cholesterol forms a building in the manufacture of certain steroidal hormones, such as those from the adrenal cortex and the sex gland. So we do need some cholesterol, but it's when we get it in excess that it's a problem. There's actually never been a deficiency with cholesterol, no disease caused from a deficiency of cholesterol. So any condition in the in the life of a person that increases the need for extra hormones, such as physical stress, of illness, the various emotional stresses will increase the production of cholesterol. Also pregnancy. I had a friend of mine whose cholesterol was 300 when she was pregnant, but she was a total vegetarian, eating very healthy, exercising, and so we found out that it's the ratio that counts, not so much how high it is, and we will see this in a minute. Okay, because cholesterol is so efficiently manufactured in the body, there's no daily requirement for it from any food. So this shows that, again, that high HDL, now this is the supposedly what they call good cholesterol. If you have a higher ratio of HDL, when you have a higher amount of LDL, then that's when you don't have a problem. But if your HDL is low and your LDL is high, that is when it's very serious. And your HDL, the good cholesterol, can be increased by running, exercising. As you can see, the average HDL level, 46 to 58. If you run 7 to 10 miles, it goes up to 50, 51. If you run 21 to 60 miles, it goes all the way up to 57. Now here's the ratio. This is taking the HDL and dividing it into the LDL. And if you get a ratio of 2.8, that is perfect. That is what a total vegetarian has, and you have, as we can see in a few minutes, it's the best, the least risk for heart attacks. So a total vegetarian is a 2.8. Now Boston Marathon runners was a 3.4. Average women is 4.4. Average men is a 5.0. And of course a victim, if you having this high as a male, you will have a heart attack eventually if you don't get it under control. Okay, so this is my husband's ratio. He got this taken in 1997. His ratio was 2.9 at that time, which is still very, very good. This is our fish oil and beef, the cholesterol content, which is high. So the more, as we can see, if we are taking it in an oil form or in a fat form, it's very high cholesterol. All right, so 3 members in the fat family. So we have saturated fat, monosaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. And the yellow is the saturated, which is the one that causes buildup in the blood vessels the most. And that's, lard, anything that's solid at room temperature, butter, margarine, all those are very high in saturated fat or triglycerides. Let's see, here we go. And the purple is polyunsaturated, and that is more of the omega-3 and omega-6s. Okay, so here is one of the reasons why we need to consider oil in our diet, because the oil, the olive oil and a lot of different oils will constrict the blood vessels because they're high in omega-6. There's very few that are high in omega-3, which relaxes the blood vessels. And so, and also, if you look at this olive oil, you can see that if you consumed the same amount of calories in olives as you did in olive oil, and they are delicious too, you would get all that vitamin A, 402 units, vitamin K, 1.4, potassium, 8, calcium 88, copper 28%, iron 41%. And if you took it in the oil state, it's taken out of the product that God put it in, and this is the same amount of calories or close to it. The vitamin, there's 0 vitamin A, vitamin K, 0 potassium, 0 calcium, 0 copper, and 0 iron. Now, this doctor that I'm going to introduce you is Caldwell Esselstyn, and he was the one that was on the first clip that we saw. He has a practice in Cleveland, Ohio, where he reverses heart disease. He's a surgeon also, and he used to do surgeries, but now he takes his clients, his patients, and he puts them on a plant-based diet, very low in fat, no oil, total vegetarian, and he gets success. Now, this is his book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Caldwell Esselstyn. I highly recommend it. And if you go to YouTube, you can listen to some of his health talks if you put in his name. Okay, so this is a statement from Caldwell Esselstyn. It says, a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet that avoids all animal products and oils, as well as reducing or avoiding soybeans, nuts, and avocado, will reverse coronary heart disease. And this next slide is the proof. But this is, of course, a healing program. It's not one that you would stay on the rest of your life. And you would not always avoid the nuts, soybeans, and avocado because they're good whole foods. But while you're reversing heart disease, you want to clean up those vessels. And so you want to get as little fat in those vessels as possible while you're doing some other things that I'm going to mention. All right, this was one of his patients showing how he reversed this coronary heart disease. As you can see, the vessel, the heart vessel was compromised and clogged, and this was 30 months later. Yeah, it took a long time, but I think you can speed up the process if you learn some of these principles that I'm going to be teaching you while you're here. And it's going to be the specific foods that clean up plaque and the vessels more than just going on a vegetarian diet. Right,
what do we have to eat? Whole grains, legumes, lentils,
Esselstyn.
vegetables, and fruit. You've all familiar and heard about this. No oil, fish, fowl, meat. No oil. Let's just take a moment here because some people still are not clear about the fact, no oil. All right, why? Because the data. Olive oil is terribly seductive. Scott Grundy did some studies that are very short term that showed that it increases your good cholesterol, lowers your bad cholesterol, improves your ratio. It got a huge amount of press. Doctors heard about it, and therefore it must be wonderful, right? Wrong. Because you look at longer term studies, Blankenhorn, right in California, 2 groups of patients, one saturated fat, the other monounsaturated like olive oil. The baseline angiogram at the end of the year, the angiogram disease of coronary disease had progressed just as much in each group. Lawrence Riddell in the Research Triangle took the African green monkey, some similar lipid metabolism to man, saturated, unsaturated, 5 years. In the monounsaturated olive oil group, higher HDL, lower LDL, better ratio, autopsy, just as much coronary disease. The oil companies didn't like that, so Lawrence Riddell repeated the study with rodents, and the result, the same. Dr. Vogel has gone on and shown us indeed that olive oil activates clotting factor 7 just as much as butter. Wow. And Vogel in a separate study and Ong in a separate study have shown how it impairs flow-mediated dilatation that I just talked to you about, the brachial artery tourniquet test. And last month, in the journal of the National Cancer Institute, olive oil, along with meat and dairy, is implicated in a risk factor for breast cancer. Well, that wasn't quite enough, because I do get the Harvard Heart Letter. And I have great respect for Thomas Lee, who's the editor. But one of those heart letters said, for heart patients, be sure you use the heart-healthy oils. Canola oil, olive oil. So I wrote to Dr. Lee. I said, Dear Dr. Lee, I have always had the highest regard for your Harvard Heart letter, but I was puzzled and skeptical by your recommendation for oils for patients with heart disease. And I enclose for your review these 6 articles and references that I'm aware of that suggest that this is not a good idea, and I also enclose for you a copy of my study. And 6 months later, I got a letter back from Dr. Lee. Dear Dr. Esselstyn, thank you for your reprints and your study. I would agree with you that as we move forward in this most complex of diseases, that we should remain flexible.
Okay. So, we can also, with this same diet for heart disease, lower our risk of dementia, because it is a lack of circulation. When our vessels get clogged up with this plaque, it keeps the blood flowing freely to the brain. And so it says that we can keep our brain healthy with these 6 foods plus a dose of sunshine. So people in their late 80s with higher blood levels of B, C, D, and E, vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids found in good fats, of course, in the product that they're put in is the best, did better on cognitive tests and had less of brain shrinkage typical of Alzheimer's disease, according to a recent study by Jeannie Bowman. Okay, so the Mediterranean diet and heart disease. 254 patients in Crete, 152 with heart disease and 152 without heart disease, ages 37 to 77. Patients with heart disease significantly higher intake of MUFA, which is the same thing as olive oil, and patients without heart disease, higher intake of carbohydrates, fiber, folic acid, and omega-3. So what was the results? The more MUFA, or olive oil, the more heart disease. And this is Dr. Vogel. He's the one that Caldwell Esselstyn just mentioned in the last little clip that did the study on the olive oil. It says, this study has shown that a meal containing olive oil as a fat source reduces brachial artery flow mediated vasodilation by 31% for up to 6 hours after a meal, peaking at 4 hours. So that's your lungs. You need that flow of blood, but for 6 hours, 31% is reduced after eating olive oil. It says the benefits of a Mediterranean diet seems to be the antioxidant-rich foods, fruit, veggies, nuts, and grains. Dietary fruit and vegetables and their products seem to have some protection against the direct impairment of the endothelia function by the olive oil. Okay, so this is 2 tablespoons of olive oil, has 3 times the amount of saturated fat as 4 ounces of chicken. 2 tablespoons of olive oil has the same amount of saturated fat as 4 ounces of lean beef. 2 tablespoons of olive oil has more calories than 1/2 cup of the most premium ice cream. So it is being proven these days that olive oil is not the best food for you, even though it has been claimed to be better than butter. Okay, so this is an article that was given us from the U.S. News. It says it was Willett who insisted that not all fats, but certain fats lead to coronary heart disease. Saturated fats in red meat, butter, and cheese were known dangers. He linked trans fatty acids in margarine and shortening made from partially hydrogenated oil to the epidemic of heart disease that began in the 1930s and 1940s. Trans fatty acids increased LDL, or bad cholesterol, and depresses HDL. Now, it's interesting to find out that the time when this hard margarine came in, because they were finding out that butter and lard and these things were causing heart disease and problems. And so they switched to the vegetable thinking it was better. But it is not better, because actually, even though it is for sure lower in cholesterol, there is no cholesterol, but it is high in omega-6. Omega-6 constricts the blood vessels, where omega-3 relaxes the blood vessels. And this is why olive oil has this problem, is because it's higher in omega-6 than it is omega-3. And a lot of fats that we have from nuts and seeds, beans and grains, are higher in omega-6. All the fat that's in fruits and vegetables, even though it's minute, is super high in omega-3, which relaxes the blood vessels. There's some foods that are a little bit higher in fat than others, like winter squash and some of the beans. So we want to be careful that we don't try to replace butter with something that's even worse for you. So should we switch to margarine? Women who eat 4 or more teaspoonfuls of margarine a day have a 66% greater risk of heart disease than women who have margarine less than once a month. The trans fatty acid levels in margarine seem to be the problem. Vegetable oils should be used in their natural state, said the lead researcher. Now, I know that this seems like, oh, no more oil on my food, no more butter on my bread. What am I going to do? But we're going to show you a lot of nice recipes, substitutes for this margarine. So what happens if we eat too much saturated fats or cholesterol? So first of all, it gets starts out with a little streak underneath the epithelium, and this is our blood vessel. And as this builds up, then we get more and more smaller area that the blood can flow through. And then because this plaque is oil-based, it starts to get rancid. And then what happens is the body starts putting a little cap on it to help patch it up. But then that cap eventually gets so big and doesn't hold up very well, because it's not intended. We weren't intended to eat this kind of food. And then a blood clot will happen when it breaks through and blood leaks in there. And this is what causes a stroke.
Heart attacks, certain cancers, osteoporosis, diabetes. The major diseases of our society may be caused in part by what we eat. One of the physicians who helped me to understand why is Dr. Michael Clapper.
I first woke up, so to speak, when I was working on the anesthesia service, learning how to put people to sleep. And I was seeing my patients for the next day's surgery for coronary artery bypass surgery in order to bypass clogged arteries in their heart. Because it was late at night, I drew the man's blood test, and when I took the blood to the laboratory and had it processed, I couldn't believe my eyes. Now, normally, this liquid layer floating on top of the blood clot is quite transparent. It's a yellow, but quite clear. You can see right through it. The blood in this patient's tube, however, was anything but clear. The serum floating on his clot was thick and greasy white. It looked like glue. In fact, it stuck to the sides of the blood tube when I shook the tube. I went back to the patient. I said, Mr. Phillips, did you eat before you came to the hospital tonight? He said, yes. I said, what did you have? He said, I had a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And when he said that, I realized that what I was looking at in his tube was all the fat in the beef burger, all the butter fat in the cheese, and the butter fat in the ice cream and in the milkshake. And all this fat had oozed out into his blood and actually turned his blood fatty. Well, 30, 40, 50 years of keeping your blood very fatty creates changes in the blood vessels that are very dangerous.
Over the years, arteries can become clogged with fatty material. Then a blood clot can form, blocking the blood flow completely. If the artery leads to the heart, the lack of oxygen can cause heart muscle to die. That's a heart attack. If the clogged artery leads to the brain, the patient has a stroke.
The next morning, we took Mr. Phillips to the operating room, and I put him to sleep, and the surgeon opened up his chest. And from these arteries, he began pulling out yellow, greasy deposits of fatty material called atherosclerosis.
Okay, so it's not a pretty picture, is it? But it's always the same cause for heart attacks and stroke. It's the buildup in the veins, and this is why the omega-3 fatty acids are so good, because they open up the veins, and the saturated fat is so bad because it builds up, and then the omega-6 is bad because it constricts the blood vessels, especially for high blood pressure is the cause of this. So what are some things that can reduce this cholesterol and increase the HDL? So walnuts, actually, the study group ate 1/2 cup, 28 grams of walnuts a daily for 4 weeks. An average LDL, which bad cholesterol, was reduced by 18 milligrams. So oatmeal helps because it has a soluble fiber that can go in and clean up the vessels. Some fiber is just good for the colon. Some can be assimilated into the bloodstream and help to clean up the blood. So we're going to show a few of these that are soluble and insoluble. So here we have dried figs, garbanzo beans. These are the ones that have the soluble fiber that can go in and clean up the vessels. Lima beans, soybeans, kidney beans, corn grits, carob flour. Now, carob is what we use in place of chocolate. It tastes a lot like chocolate, and we're going to be making a carob fudge topping for waffles tomorrow, and we will see how delicious that is. It's like a hot fudge on top of your waffles. And so, but look at that. It's 30 grams of fiber for 1 cup of carob flour. So it's very high in soluble fiber. Foods that are high in insoluble fiber also, we have the wheat bran, coconut, pistachio nuts, black-eyed peas, almonds, lentils, and corn bran also. Okay, so some of the strongest animals that we have is the elephant, and the average height is 10 foot at the shoulders. The weight is 4 to 6 tons, and the food source that they eat is grass, foliage, and fruit. And the strongest man, the Ironman triathlon. Only one man to win the Ironman triathlon more than twice is Dave Scott, 6-time winner. Food choices, vegetarian. So it doesn't make you weak, and it also keeps you from having so much health problems in the future. So endurance. This is a vegetarian. Let's try to guess what this is. 14 to 15 hands at the withers. That gives it away. 1,000 to 2,000 pounds. A diet, grass and grains. It's vegetarian. And it's a horse, of course. And here we go with a 24-hour triathlon. Swam 4.8 miles. Cycled 185 miles. Ran 52 miles. Sixto Linares. Food choice, complete vegetarian. That means no milk, eggs, cheese, things like that also. Okay, here we go with strength. The rhinoceros. Length is 10 to 12 feet. Height is 4 to 6 feet. Weight 1,000 to 3,000 pounds. Food is grass, fruit, leaves, and herbs. And here we go with, for strength, Bill Pearl, 4-time winner, Mr. Universe Bodybuilding. Roy Higgins, winner, Mr. American Bodybuilder. Andreas Kashling, winner, Mr. International Bodybuilding. And Stan Price, world record bench press. Food choices, all vegetarians. And that is the end for today. And we're going to go into more into how to clean up the cells, so that the environment of the cells is clean so that it can get rid of its toxins. We're going to talk more about what you can eat and what you can do to help clean up those vessels to reverse the problem that's there. And even though we may not know it's there, if we have been eating the standard American diet, it's almost guaranteed to have a problem. Or dairy. Dairy builds up the veins very quickly also.